It was 1995, and two couples, Paul and Ruthie, Greg and Fiona, decided to go on a hiking trip in the stunning Ura Valley in Bhutan. They were surrounded by breathtaking views of the mountains and lush landscapes, the kind of place that makes you forget about everything else and just take in the beauty of nature. The air was fresh, and the scenery was almost unreal, but things were about to take a dark turn. As they hiked through the valley, something strange happened. Paul started hearing a sound, something no one else could hear. The rest of the group was completely unaware of it, but Paul couldn't shake it off. The sound seemed to be calling him, drawing him towards something deeper into the valley. Without telling anyone, he decided to follow it. As he moved forward, lost in the sound, Paul became distracted and in a terrifying moment, fell into a deep ravine. His friends, horrified, rushed to the edge, but they couldn't see where he had fallen. It was dark, and they had no idea where he could be. After some time, Greg, holding a flashlight, bravely went down into the ravine to search for Paul. And that's when he found something he never expected. In the dim light of the cave, Greg saw Paul sitting in front of what looked like a massive skeleton. But this wasn't any ordinary skeleton. It was much bigger, with strange, protruding bones from its back and shoulders. It looked like something out of a nightmare. And Paul? He was just staring at it, completely motionless, as if in some kind of trance. Greg tried calling out to Paul, but he didn't respond. It was like he was in another world. When Greg got closer, his flashlight revealed something even more chilling. More bones scattered around the skeleton, and a heavy, eerie feeling in the air. Paul didn't seem aware of anything. It was as if he was hypnotized. Greg reached out to touch Paul, but as he did, Paul whispered something under his breath. Greg froze, unsure what to do. But before he could react, Paul suddenly broke into tears. And just like that, he fell silent again, not moving at all. Terrified, Greg pulled Paul out of the cave and tried to get him to safety. But they were deep in the wilderness, with no way to contact help. They had no choice but to keep moving, even though Greg could barely carry Paul any farther. Then just when they thought things couldn't get worse, an old rundown house appeared in the distance. They made their way toward it, desperate for help. But as they entered the house, a strange stillness filled the air. Ruthie, sitting next to Paul, noticed something odd. Paul was holding a flute, and without thinking, she picked it up and began to play. The sound that came from the flute was exactly the same as the strange noise Paul had heard earlier in the valley. But as Ruthie played, the atmosphere shifted. She looked out the window and saw a shadow moving outside the house. It wasn't just a shadow, it was floating, almost like it was alive. In a panic, Ruthie rushed inside, locking the door behind her and grabbing a knife for protection. The shadow started banging on the door, but just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Ruthie asked Greg and Fiona if they had seen anything, but they hadn't. They hadn't seen the shadow at all. It felt like Ruthie was the only one who was aware of it. Something was wrong here, and she knew they needed to leave, but where could they go? Then suddenly, Ruthie heard something. Whispers. It was Paul mumbling something, as if he was awake now. But his words were strange, almost like a riddle. Ruthie thought she was imagining it, but when she looked around, Paul was gone. Outside, she found his footprints in the snow. They were leading up toward the mountains. Without thinking, the three of them followed the trail, hoping to find Paul. They followed the footprints to a bridge over a deep ravine, and there they saw Paul. But this wasn't the same Paul. His face was full of sorrow, regret, like he wasn't even there anymore. Greg, frustrated and confused, thought Paul was just trying to get attention. But then something snapped. Paul mumbled something, looked at Greg, and without warning, Ruthie pulled out a knife and stabbed Greg in the back, pushing him into the ravine. Fiona screamed and rushed toward the edge. But Ruthie, her eyes blank, didn't even look back. She turned to Paul, gave him one last glance, and then leapt into the ravine herself. Paul, lost in his own world, started playing the flute again, the haunting melody echoing through the cold mountain air. With this story went on for 23 years, America's Webster Mills City Time, 2018. After jogging in the morning, James LaSombra was returning home. James was a police officer. James's wife and son had died in a car accident. James considered himself guilty of their death and was spending his life in grief and regret. Because of this, he had left his police job, and now he used to run a gun shop. I don't know why, but there was always a voice echoing in James's mind which used to say, "Where were you? Where were you?" This voice always reminded James that he was not with his wife and son at the time of the accident. Today, James's wife and son had been dead for a year. James was trying to forget that grief by drowning in the intoxication of alcohol. Then he paid the bill of the restaurant with an old birthday coupon, although that birthday coupon had expired, but still the restaurant people accepted him. She wished James on his birthday and gave him a small treat. After that, James came back home. Meanwhile, James's neighbor and family friend, Nora's daughter Amanda, came to meet James. Actually, Amanda's father also died of heart attack on the same day. Amanda saw James sad and started comforting him. She said that earlier she was also broken by her father's death, but now she has come to know a fact that nothing can make her sad now. Amanda said that nothing is real in this world. Whatever is there is just in our mind. Whatever we think about with full concentration and focus, we bring it into reality. However, Amanda's words were not digested by James. After that, Amanda left from there. The next morning when James woke up, his neighbor Nora called him and called him to her house. Nora was very worried because Amanda had disappeared from the house. Nora took James to Amanda's bathroom, where blood was written on the mirror. "The empty man made me do this." By that time, Nora had already called the police. After some time, a police team came there and got involved in the investigation. In their investigation, the police found that her suitcase and her belongings were also missing from Amanda's room. Along with that, the blood in the mirror belonged to an animal. Due to this, the police came to the conclusion that maybe after her father's death, Amanda's relationship with her mother was not good. Amanda wanted to live freely on her own, so she deliberately left the house and went away. And as far as the blood in the mirror is concerned, the police believe that Amanda did all this to annoy Nora. However, Nora was very upset with this result. She said that Amanda loved her a lot. She was sure that something was wrong with Amanda. James encouraged Nora and said that he would try his best to find Amanda. During this time, James found a pamphlet of Pontifex in Amanda's book, behind which Tulpa was written. However, James also did not understand the meaning of Tulpa. He kept that pamphlet with him. After this, James took a list of Amanda's friends from Nora and went straight to Amanda's school. There, James met Amanda's best friend, Devara. I don't know why, but Devara was very nervous. On James's call, Devara came in his car and sat down. Suddenly, Devara saw a black shadow in the crowd and disappeared as soon as he blinked. This black shadow was the same one that Ruthie had seen in Bhutan 23 years ago. Seeing him, Devara was shocked. Meanwhile, James asked Devara, "Do you know about an empty man?" Hearing the name of the empty man, Devara became more terrified. She started telling James about an incident. This incident happened 2 days ago when Amanda and Devara were returning home from a bridge with their other friends in the evening. That's when Amanda found an empty bottle lying on the bridge. Amanda asked her friends, "Do you know about the empty man?" Everyone said no. Amanda said, "It is said that if you find a bottle lying on a bridge, and at that time if you repeat the name of the empty man in your mind, blow on that bottle and play it, then you will hear the sound of the empty man coming. If you call the empty man, then on the first day only the name of the empty man will come in your mind. The second day you will see him, and the third day he will be very close to you, and then something terrible will happen to you. So do you have the courage to call the empty man?" However, some friends of Amanda were very scared after hearing this story. But there a boy showed bravery, took a bottle from Amanda, and thinking about the empty man, started blowing it and playing it. After this, the rest of the people also played the bottle while thinking about the empty man again and again. After this, Amanda took the bottle and sat in the middle of the bridge in meditation and started chanting the name of the empty man while playing the bottle. Suddenly, a gust of wind passed near them, and at that moment, he heard someone coming from the dark bridge in front of him. They were all stunned. At first, they thought that maybe a human being was coming from the front, but then he heard someone running towards him. But the strange thing was that no one was visible in front of him. Afraid of death, they all ran away from there with their full speed. After hearing about this incident, James asked Devara, "Did you meet Amanda after that night?" On this, Devara said that she saw Amanda for the last time in a mall. She was whispering something in her friend Brandon's ears. In the meantime, Devar suddenly saw some people sitting in a queue on the side of the road. Although James was not able to see those people, Devar didn't tell anything to James about it, and the fear went away. After this, James found out about the other friends of Brandon and Amanda. But the strange thing was that just like Amanda, all his friends were missing. At the same time, James saw a poster of Pontifex Institute in the house of Amanda's missing friend Lisa. James immediately called Nora and informed her that Amanda's friends were missing, and also asked if Amanda used to go to any institute named Pontifex. On this, Nora said that Amanda never told her about any such institute. After this, James came to the bridge to investigate further, where Amanda and her friends had played a game of calling the empty man. As soon as he went a little further on the bridge, James found that bottle lying there. James also blew on the bottle and played it. Then suddenly a gust of wind passed by him, and the next moment there was a strange silence all around. Although James did not hear the sound of anyone's footsteps, but he heard a sound like hitting something with iron. He saw that the sound was coming from an open manhole on the bridge. As soon as James went inside that manhole, he saw a terrible scene. There, the corpses of all Amanda's friends were hanging in a queue. It seemed as if all of them had done the same shit. That voice was coming from the iron of his shoes, and there was blood written on a wall. The empty man made me do this. James informed the police at the same time, after which the police recovered the bodies of all Amanda's friends. Meanwhile, on the other side, Devar was taking a steam bath in a spa. Then that black shadow suddenly appeared there and grabbed Devar's neck. He had a scissor in his hand, which he started beating on Devar's face. But the next moment, that shadow had disappeared somewhere, and Devar herself was beating the scissor on her face. Due to the blow of that scissor, Devar died there. After some time, the police also recovered Devar's dead body. The empty man was written near his dead body. After some time, James also got the news of Devar's death. James thought that there was a connection of Pontifex Institute behind all these deaths. He started researching about Pontifex and Tulpa on the internet. He came to know that Pontifex is a cult society which believes in a thought of Tibetan Buddhism, according to which, by thinking deeply about anything that comes to mind and through religious rituals, it can be manifested in reality. Even a person who is manifested by the power of the mind is called a tulpa. A formula was also told to create a tulpa. Thought plus concentration plus time is equal to flesh. At the same time, James saw a picture of a cabin on the internet where in 1991, some members of Pontifex Society were experimenting to create tulpa. But something happened in that cabin that killed all the members. After getting this information, James came to Pontifex Institute the next morning, where the leader of Pontifex cult, Arthur Parsons, was giving a speech. In his speech, Arthur gave a message that you have not lost anything in this world. You just have to look for more. In the end, Arthur said that this message has come to us directly from the empty man. James was shocked to hear the name of the empty man. Then after the lecture was over, James met Arthur and asked him about the empty man. On this, Arthur said that the empty man is a supernatural entity. They are all followers of the empty man. He said that the empty man fulfills every wish of his followers. But until we follow their orders, Arthur left from there. After this, James showed a photo of Amanda to a follower boy named Garrett and asked, "Did Amanda also come here?" On this, Garrett answered no and left from there. Then James started to investigate that institute secretly. But two staff of the institute saw James and pushed him out of the back door. At the same time, Garrett was smoking at the back door. He called James and told him that Amanda was here before, but now she has been sent to a secret camp of Pontifex where they are going to do some rituals. Hearing this, James took the address of the camp from Garrett and left for the camp at the same time. When James reached there, he saw an old cabin there. When James searched the cabin, he found the files of Amanda and all her friends, which had all their biodata. This made James understand that Amanda and her friends had joined Pontifex Society, but then James found a file of his name there. Although that file was empty, but James was shocked to see the file of his name there. After this, James went to another cabin present there. There were some old videotapes kept there. James played a videotape. In that video, some followers of Pontifex were experimenting to create tulpa. They were sitting in a circle and meditating. Suddenly, a strange man appeared on the chair next to them. Maybe he was a tulpa born from the thoughts of those followers, but he was strange. He had 6 fingers in his hand, and his eyes were shining like a bulb. In the next footage, the creature was pulling out its blood by scratching its own body with its nails, and it was seen making a picture on the wall with that blood. James saw that the picture was still made on the wall of the cabin. In that picture, he could see someone sitting in meditation. He was looking like a skeleton in that hole in Bhutan to some extent, which we saw in the beginning. In the next footage, he started looking at the camera, and in the meantime, the video footage stopped. After this, James came out of the cabin. It was night by then. Then he saw a light in the middle of the forest. When he took the torch and went towards that light, he saw that many followers of Pontifex Society were performing a ritual surrounded by fire. Meanwhile, James saw the flames going toward the sky, and his head started spinning. But the next moment, he saw everything as it was before. James thought it would be better to get out of there. But as soon as he was about to leave, a strange silence spread there. When James turned around, he saw that all the followers were staring at him. Suddenly, he started following James. James ran away with his full speed and left with the car. James came straight to the police station and told the police everything while showing the file of Amanda and her friends, and said that there is definitely a hand of Pontifex Society in the death of Amanda's friends. But instead of listening to James's arguments, the police warned him to stay away from the case, and he also seized those files. After this, James returned home. Then at night, when James was in deep sleep, he had a dream of his wife and son's death. Actually, James considered himself responsible for his wife and son's death, because at the time of his accident, James was hooking up with his neighbor Nora. James always had this pain that if he was with his family at that time, they would have been saved. Suddenly, James saw a chair in an empty room in his dream. James suddenly woke up from the dream, but James was talking to himself. Then he suddenly saw a black shadow rising from the door, which attacked James the next moment. James got scared and hid in a corner and picked up a bat lying there. But then that shadow suddenly disappeared. James thought it was his hallucination. Then the next morning, James was keeping an eye outside Pontifex Institute. Then he saw Garrett and some children going somewhere in a car. James started following them. Then he picked up some more children and came to a hospital. James also went behind them in that hospital. Then they came to a ward in the hospital where a patient was lying unconscious on the bed. They began to sit on their knees in front of the patient and pray. James returned from there. After all, who was the patient in the hospital? And what were the members of Pontifex praying to him? To find out the truth, James sneaked into the Pontifex Institute that night. James found the file of the admitted patient in the hospital. But the strange thing was that the name or address of that man was not written in that file. At that time, James once again found the file of his name in the middle of that man's document. When James opened that file and saw it, he went crazy. That file had all the bio data of James. It also had a picture of James's wife and son. Not only that, it also had that birthday coupon, which James had used in that restaurant in the beginning. He even had a prescription of that medicine which he used to take for depression. James was surprised that where did Pontifex Society get his bio data and photographs? That's when James got a picture, which left him stunned. In that picture, James was sitting on a chair without clothes in an empty room. Seeing that picture, James's mind went around. To find out the truth, James once again reached the hospital where the patient was admitted. There, James introduced himself to a nurse as a private detective and asked the nurse about that patient. On this, the nurse said that no one knows the name and address of that man. That man has been in a coma for 23 years. He came to this hospital a year ago. Before that, he was in some other hospital. Hearing this, James asked who pays the hospital bill. On this, the nurse said, "I don't even know this. However, a lot of visitors come to meet him every day. Even now, a visitor is in his room." Hearing this, when James went to that man's room, he saw that Amanda was looking at that man. Seeing him, James was shocked. He said, "Amanda, I was looking for you. Do you know this man?" On this, Amanda said, "I don't even know who he is, but this man is the host of the Empty Man. He is like an antenna, which transmits the message of the Empty Man to our mind." Hearing this, James thought that Amanda has also gone crazy due to the cult. He called Nora to inform her about Amanda, but then something strange happened. Nora refused to recognize James and cut the phone by saying the wrong number. Meanwhile, the face of that man appeared there. That man is no one else. In fact, it was Paul, the same Paul who fell into the pit while going to the valleys of Bhutan in the beginning, after which terrible incidents happened to him. Actually, the skeleton in that pit belonged to the old messenger of the empty man, whose body had been buried in that pit for 500 years. He was looking for a human being to replace him for 500 years, but someone who was full of regret could replace him. He had found that man in the form of Paul. After falling into the well, when Paul touched him, his power must have penetrated into Paul. He did not want to let anyone in his way, so he possessed Ruthie and killed her with his other friends. However, no one knew how and where Paul met the Pontifex Society. Amanda told James about Paul. Soon they are going to die because the human body cannot live with these powers for a long time. So we needed another person who could take their place and transmit the message of the empty man to us. But we didn't have much time, so we did an experiment. Instead of finding a person to take their place, we decided to manifest it with the power of the mind. We decided to create a tulpa. Just after hearing this, James's head started spinning. It was because the tulpa created by Pontifex Society to become the host of the empty man was James. Amanda told James, "You are not a real person. In fact, you are a tulpa who was born 3 days before our thoughts. Whatever memories of your wife and child are in your mind, we have put it all. You must be thinking that I don't know about your and my mom's affair, but I know everything because I have written your biography, like a script, how you will look and how your personality will be, everything. You must remember that formula of tulpa, that if most of the people think about a person with full concentration, then that person will appear like a magic. All the people of our society did a session together in which everyone thought about you with full concentration and accepted that you are real, and then you appeared like a magic. Although we had created many groups before, but then we came to know that to become the host of the empty man, it is necessary to have a lot of regret and fear in a person. That's why we filled your family with regret of losing you. My mom and those police officers are also with us. Whatever we have done with you so far, we have done it to increase your fear and regret. And now you are ready to become the host of the empty man. As soon as this truth came out, he went crazy like James. Then suddenly his conscious mind reached the same cave where that skeleton was present. Then, as soon as he saw, a shadow came out of that skeleton and he got into it through James's mouth. Now James had completely become a host of Empty Man. James first shot Paul and killed him. Then he came out. At that time, the staff present in the hospital were also followers of the Empty Man. They all knelt down in front of James, and this film ended here.